of the gaps in terms of what we anticipate in the schedule. But we're excited. This is also in accordance with the MOU that we agreed to earlier in the year with the county and the Spurs. I know the county is doing their community engagement, and this will be the community engagement portion. We do anticipate updating the council on this likely in midsummer, and then going from there.
Right, and so as Eric mentioned, these are going to be 2-day charrettes for each council district. And so typically it'll be probably a Monday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday. The charrettes will include opportunities for individual stakeholder meetings. So for example, small businesses. We might have small businesses from that district come to those charrettes and have a discussion about small business involvement in this project. There might be a charrette stakeholder meeting specific to affordable housing. We also will have tabletop discussions based on what we've heard the residents are concerned about. So one thing we know residents have concerns about is infrastructure. Where are they going to park? What is the traffic going to look like? And then also you have concerns about gentrification, displacement. So these charrettes will not only be about getting information, allowing the community to really design that fan experience, but also be able to get more details on those specific concerns they've expressed for the past couple months. And as I mentioned, we've heard concerns about parking and infrastructure. We've heard concerns about affordable housing. We've heard concerns about funding. How is this going to be funded? And so these charrettes will provide space to go in more detail with each of those items. Now, Eric alluded to some guiding principles. So similar to what we did with the affordable housing bond in 2022, we created some guiding principles that were created from the community that talked about as you move forward and work on these projects, these are the things that we want to guide your decision making. So that might be, we want to make sure there's opportunities for small businesses to participate in this project. And another guiding principle may relate to public space and actually having activations for the community. Another guiding principle could be about accessibility to the site. But these are the guiding principles that will help us move forward with each of those projects. And the reason for that is, the San Antonio Sports Entertainment District, it's, a series of projects, but several of those projects are moving forward without the arena, but they all have their own different timeline. And so we want to make sure that they are all following the same principles as it relates to the concerns that we hear in the community. And so that'll be an opportunity for our community to weigh in. And then that phase 2, Eric mentioned, going back to the community, making sure they saw how we've incorporated their feedback into the plan, and then following up as projects come out of their conceptual phase to get more community engagement.
And I would just add that this is going to go beyond in-person events. We're also going to launch a survey for residents to give their input through that format. We already have an engagement platform available, saspeakup.com/sportsdistrict, which is up right now. That will eventually be the place for folks to go and give their input online. The survey will be bilingual, so accessibility is a concern for us, and inclusion throughout this entire process. Eventually, we'll also be launching a website separate from SA Speak Up that will provide a plethora of documentation, and it'll be constantly updated as this progresses, as these charrettes progress. So it'll be a place for folks to go to get updated and actually experience the engagement process online as well if they want to.
How do you combat the perception that decisions have already been made and this is just an exercise?
Decisions haven't been made, but there's a lot of work in front of us, and we'll be updating the council on funding framework and infrastructure in early June. Will be the next public presentation, update to the council. We talked last week. There are, regarding the funding framework, in particular around an NBA arena, it really centers around those 5 potential revenue sources: the venue tax, the Spurs, development revenue, lease revenue over there in that Hemisphere Park area and the project finance zone. None of those, there's no term sheet, there's no aspect of what that looks like yet. So a deal is far from being done. In addition to the other areas of the downtown district, we have the work that needs to come back to the council regarding the convention center. We went to the council in December to lay out initially what the plan could be. We've been working throughout the spring to update that and come back to the council with a good final estimate of a potential cost that would be funded with the hotel occupancy tax. So I know that there may be folks that think this is done. It's far from it. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and the public engagement part, as you heard the council talk earlier in the year, is an important element of that.
Do you think the Spurs are going to ante up, so to speak, in July? That's what County Judge Sakai said. We might actually hear a figure from this.
Well, I mean, we've had conversations with them regarding the funding framework. I don't know. I mean, I think there's still work that needs to be done. It's pretty, when you look at the 5 funding streams, they are pretty definitive in terms of potential. But I know the county is working hard on the venue tax portion. The council took action last week here at the council for the PFZ. The Spurs, development revenue, and any potential revenue from leases is all still in production.
How do you see the community feedback actually shaping what this district looks like? And I'm curious whether there'll be an opportunity for folks to just come out and say they don't support some or a few of these projects.
I think this process will allow that to happen. I mean, I think we've, and somebody asked me this question last week when I talked to the media after the council meeting. If people feel strongly one way or another, that you shouldn't necessarily wait until the charrette is scheduled in your council district. There are plenty of other mediums, but this will allow for that. I think regarding the first part of your question, Molly, which was
Just like an example of how you envision feedback being reflected or incorporated into this.
so, this is another example where we utilize this process, and it was with the terminal expansion out at the airport. The community engagement and stakeholder engagement developed guiding principles, as Lori described, that are part of the project and get incorporated, whether that's eventually design or elements or things that the public generally wants to see. I think the council really wants to hear that, and that's one of the reasons why we're shooting on giving them that update in midsummer on what the public feels. Every meeting I go to, whether it's a neighborhood meeting or anything else, there are plenty of opinions, and I think collecting those and organizing them, that's why we've asked a third party to help us with that. I think the last part of it that Brian mentioned is critical, is having one spot on our website, on our front page, where we're providing that information, and updates would be critical.
Is community
Go ahead.
okay. Is community engagement too premature given the fact that a new mayor will be taking the lead when community engagement happens?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's something that we started talking about with this mayor and council earlier in the year when we did the MOU, and so we knew that there was going to be a transition. I think that community engagement, the sooner it starts, the better, because ultimately, yes, we're going to have a transition here in within a month with the mayor and a number of new council members. And I think they're gonna be looking for the same type of report in terms of feedback from the public and what's important and what's not. So I feel like, given the earlier conversations with the existing mayor and council, we've got to continue to move forward.
My question is actually from the opposite end of that, not
Okay.
premature, but instead of, this was first presented in November, why is it that it's taken 6 months to get to the point of getting community feedback?
Well, the MOU with the city and the Spurs and the county was approved earlier this year. And that took some time between November and earlier this year when that was executed. We've been working on developing a plan that we think is on target in terms of what the council has been looking for, and that I think from the city's perspective is necessary as we go through a large project like this. So I don't feel like we're late or too early. I think we're on schedule with what we said earlier in the year when we talked to the council about the MOU.
And the number one issue people ask about is how is it gonna be funded? And we're still trying to answer that question. We should be able to have a better framework of how this will be funded before the charrettes happen, and we can bring that in. But if we started this 6 months ago, we wouldn't be able to ask the number one question San Antonio residents are asking is who's paying for it.
And
So we needed time to work through that exercise.
And that's a good point, but that's part of the council update in early June. That will need to continue through the summer as we go through our own transition here.
Of the 5 major funding possibilities, when you have the update in early June, which of those will you be able to be specific about in terms of amounts?
So we're gonna lay out a framework around development potential, around potential use of the PFZ. And remember, the PFZ that we talked about last week is critical to both the convention center, the Alamo Dome, as well as potentially an NBA arena, so it's part of all that. I think we'll be able to lay out any potential revenue from leases and how we could utilize that development revenue in order to issue debt. I know the county, I said earlier, I know the county is working hard on their venue tax issues, so I suspect that'll be finalized here pretty soon. The part that I don't necessarily, that the city doesn't necessarily control, is the Spurs part, and we are working closely with them. I don't know if that'll be done by the beginning of June.
You mentioned that this, you'll have the funding answers for these charrettes. Is that, I mean, is it gonna be, my understanding was that's gonna be that's the framework finalized, so any input or thoughts that people might have on these charrettes about the funding, is that liable to change the formula if you hear, very much against one particular or multiple forms of funding?
My guess is that the update to council at the beginning of June is not gonna be final. I mean, back to your question, I think we need to be realistic that's we're gonna have a transition here. And to think that it's gonna be final at the beginning of June, I think is not correct. I think number 2, in the MOU, part of what the city agreed to was initiating that funding framework conversation publicly no later than July. So so I guess we could wait till the end of June, the end of June to do it, or the end of July. The sooner we do it, the better, because I think we're in a position, given the work that we've done over the last couple of months, to update the council and, more importantly, the public on what it potentially could look like.
But I just mean, the MOU says you're hoping to have that framework by July. Is that whatever is presented by July? Is that the final version, or if people have strong feelings about the funding sources during the charrettes, could the city change course on how you choose to fund?
I don't want. I'm sorry, I cut you off. I don't want to speak for the mayor and the council. So obviously, the MOU talked about what the city was going to do and the timing of it. Ultimately, the mayor and the council have got to weigh in on that process as well. And part of that is not only their own conversations publicly, but also, what does the community sense about this type of project?
At $3 or $4 billion, is it fair to say this is the biggest thing since Hemisphere 68? I mean, I can't think of a bigger project.
Well, I want to stress that the Sports Entertainment District it's a bunch of projects that were going to happen regardless of the arena coming in or not. So, for example, we have to expand our convention center. The John Woods Courthouse, that was already part of the Hemisphere plan to do a P3 to get an event venue operator to redevelop and operate it. So a lot of these projects that you're putting as part of that $3 to $4 billion were projects that were already going to be done as part of the Hemisphere master plan, or we were already working on as it pertains to the Alamo Dome turning 30 and the convention center needing to be expanded to remain competitive. So I just want to, when you say that $3 to $4 billion, it's not something new we've been talking about. We've been talking about doing these projects as far back as when the Hemisphere Master Plan was adopted in 2012.
I think the answer is also yes, right? Because, you know, even though we've talked about we needed to make sure that our own assets like the Alamo Convention Center remain competitive, we have taken over the last couple of years, we have taken a more strategic approach to actually developing these plans that we've had in place, like Hemisphere Park. It's larger than the redevelopment of the airport in terms of potential impact and cost, and I think it has a lot of opportunity to take a corner of downtown that has a historic significance to us, is surrounded by a bunch of city assets, and create a new destination for residents.
I notice that you keep using the term charrette. Is there a reason using that? It seems very specific. Is that like how it's going to be laid? Does that have to do with how the meeting is going to be run or laid out?
Well, charrettes typically are referring to a very community-engaged process, and typically when you think of charrettes, you think of people sitting at a table with colors and pencils, you know, working on the plan, identifying areas that they're interested in or types of uses. So the charrette is a way for us to accomplish quite a few things, and like the stakeholder meetings, but also let the community design the district. And so when I think of charrette, I think about having a public design kind of process embedded in that.
The other part of it, Garrett, is that we didn't want this process to be Lori or me or Brian or somebody from the city standing up in front of a big group and just talking, right? We wanted it to be engaging, and this is one of the reasons why we've hired someone to help us with that. You know, we can do public presentations and be able to lay out a presentation and answer questions, but that's not really engaging. We do that now, and we're trying to do something a little bit different. I think the council expects something a little bit different.
How many meetings in total are we talking about? Because you mentioned meetings, you said charrettes and meetings in each 10 districts plus stakeholder.
No, it's 10. It'll be 10 two-day charrettes, one for each council district. Within that charrette, it's 2 days, and so they will embed in there focus groups, stakeholder meetings. So it's those 2 days that might have multiple meetings built in with them.
And there
But
will,
it's open to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
there'll be follow-up presentations to show how feedback was actually incorporated. So,
How much is the contract with Eagle City?
About $150,000.
And then could you clarify what you said about the Spurs, about when you expect that they're going to publicly announce their potential contribution?
Well, I didn't say that. I said that's up as we work through there. I'm not going to put a timeline on them.
Did they agree with MOU with you that though
Yes.
by the start of July they are expected to publicly say?
They're part of that MOU is that the parties would lay out that that funding framework no later than July is what the MOU says. We're gonna give the council an update in early June.
Are you, you're doing a negotiation with the Spurs and the county, one of which is a private entity. Is there any concern of publicly I'm sure you've talked about this in private, but publicly laying out what the city can contribute and then letting a private franchise go second and say what they'll do once they know what?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? We don't want to do that, but I also think that it's important as we talk about the funding streams, the development revenue. But for the development occurring is not taken away from existing resources. Leases on that property or the use of that property are leases that don't exist right now. The PFZ needs to be, as we talked about last week with the council, is a funding source for 3 potential: the Dome, the Convention Center, and potentially an NBA arena. So those are the development revenue is being generated by whoever's willing to make a commitment to develop that area. And much like, and you'll recall, the missions, right? There was part of that agreement there was a commitment to development and the taxable value that generated the ability for us to consider proposing to the council and the council approving the issuance of debt based on that commitment.
So when you say development, it's both an arena, but also apartments, stores, retail,
Yes.
restaurants. Is that a private developer, or is the anticipation that the Spurs would be doing that as some kind of franchises have started to do?
Well, either way, it would be private. It would be private.
Has the city learned anything from the development of the Alamo Dome that's taken it in this, since it's kind of it's a big sports complex? It seems like a lot of, through the course of time, the Alamo Dome seems to be better loved now. But there was a time when it was too small, it was too big, should have been built for football, should have been built for baseball. Have y'all learned anything from that?
What we learned is that the Alamo Dome was critical to the region, not just to the city. And having a large 65,000 multi-purpose stadium is critical in terms of stadium concerts, UTSA football, a variety of different events, even in some cases, larger conventions that are occurring in the convention center. So the public spaces and the public asset perspective, those things are important that drive our economy. And I know the Dome had their 30th anniversary here 2 years ago. It's had millions of dollars worth of economic impact to us locally. When we have a stadium concert, we can track where the attendees are coming from based on ticket sales, and a lot of times that's coming from out of town, and that's all good for our economy, whether that's the airport or downtown hotels or from a sales tax perspective. So we have learned that those aspects are critical. I think also, and where you can weigh in on this, events like the Final Four that we had a couple of months ago that gave us an opportunity to activate a large part of Hemisphere Park that in most cases, on most weekends, is not activated. You can start to see the flesh on the bone there and what that potential could be in terms of activation and how that potentially will impact our economy.
And we are behind NRG Stadium and AT&T in Dallas. We're the third largest dome facility in Texas. And so when you're looking for large concerts like that, we are the place to go here in South Texas. And we want to, keep that prominence in South Texas. You have large concerts like Beyonce, like Taylor Swift. They're not going to go to a smaller arena. They want to sell tickets. And so having this facility helps us be able to recruit those types of events in San Antonio. So it's very important to us for overall economic development, for just providing San Antonians what they want. They want to see those types of acts. And we have a foothold in South Texas, and that's why people like to come to the facility.
One of the things that I think I mentioned last week, but we'll work on the timing of it. We are in early June, mid-June, we will have the economic impact analysis of all of this potential investment, which will kind of quantify what this type of investment could result in. We'll have that, and we'll share that with the media as well.
When you say early June will be the funding framework, will that be before or after June 7th?
Depends on our work. Yeah. But suffice it to say that whether it's before or after, it's not going to be the last conversation. I suspect those updates will need to continue as we go through our transition. Well, I shouldn't say I suspect. They will. They will. So it won't make any difference, really.
So would this be like the Alamo Dome on steroids? Could you sell it like that? As far as look what the Dome did for us, you know what I'm saying?
Well, potentially, and somebody asked me yesterday, why doesn't, and I'm from San Antonio, so I remember the first couple of years of the Dome, right? But the Dome was an asset that was funded a different way. It was funded by a sales tax allocation that the voters approved. But that asset got paid off in 5 years and is still reaping regional impact economic benefits to us. And so, yes, potentially. I mean, I think you're talking about Hemisphere Park, which hasn't been completely activated since 1968, completely activated. We've had events. But taking a strategic plan that the council approved in 2012 that envisioned all this, and we have slowly since then, in small increments, funded the redevelopment. But how do we put the rest of Hemisphere Park on steroids? Because it is a destination. It's in a corner of downtown that is surrounded by public assets, whether they are visitors going to those assets or their residents. It's an important node to downtown, and so I think Hemisphere needs that type of destination and build out because it will ultimately impact our economy.
I want to ask you a question that I hear frequently. I just got an email today about it. Was some people are wondering, why did the Spurs need a new arena? To them, Frost Bank Center still seems new.
Well, I mean, I think those are great questions, Jay, and I hear the same thing. I hear that type of question, and then in neighborhood meetings, I hear the city should have done this 10 years ago. I mean, it's somewhere in the middle, I think, and I think that's why we're going to go through community engagement to get everybody's feel and report back to the councils. I think it's important. I also think that the Spurs on their own have been clear about their intention to do something different after their commitments at the Frost Bank Arena. The Wall Street Journal had an article 2 weeks ago that said there are 38 sports and entertainment districts in conversation throughout the country involving multiple professional sports. And I think you see that for a reason, because there's maybe an element of fan experience, or whether it's revenue that drives it, or whether it is revitalizing areas of a city that need revitalization. So I think the answer is probably different, but the pure fact that there are 38 other cities in the country that are talking about similar efforts, I think is more a sign of the times, and that's probably a better question for the Spurs.
But I will add, we talk about, Final Four. Why was it so successful? It wasn't successful just because it was in the Alamo Dome. It was successful because it was in the Alamo Dome in Hemisphere, and that fan experience was much richer because they had that outdoor space. And so that's what you see in other NBA stadiums, NBA arenas across the nation, is they have the arena, but that outdoor space provides other opportunities for people to dine earlier, for people who don't want to buy tickets to the game to watch the game in that outdoor space. And so that's what we're seeing across the nation in terms of what professional sports arenas are doing. It's about having that outdoor space to really kind of amplify that fan experience, so it doesn't just have to take place in that facility.
Is there anything comparable like this in the country right now that could be used to give listeners an example of what y'all are trying to emulate?
Well, there are other examples, but I think what's unique about San Antonio is that we've got, within a 7 or 8 minute walking distance, we have the state, the city, and private sector putting $500 million into an Alamo remake. I think we have, within walking distance of this area, we have 15,000 hotel rooms. That makes us unique. There are other examples. There's Battery Park in Atlanta where the Braves play. Battery Park has more people that go to Battery Park for either housing or other events or retail or bars or restaurants that go to the Atlanta Braves games. You have the Bucks. What's the Bucks area called outside of Milwaukee? Bucks Stadium or Arena?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Okay. There's plenty of examples of that. You have recently you've had announcements around the Tennessee Titans and the new stadium and the development around there. You have an announcement last week about the Commanders in Washington and a new football and an entertainment district. So I think there's plenty of other examples. I think we're a little bit unique because Final Four was successful because there was a complete integration of Via Park and Ride on steroids. It made it easy to get down here for residents, but we also had a completely walkable downtown that allowed those folks, those visitors, to traverse back and forth. So I'd say we're a little bit unique in that sense.
The meetings, the meetings and surveys, do we have dates on when they're at, any of the specifics? Is it all TBD?
TBD, but as soon as we do, we'll make sure we push that out.
Okay, so, but again, 10 two-day community charrettes in June, July, in each of the, one in each of the council districts. Online survey, same time frame, or,
It'll be for each council district.
there's gonna be an online element for each of the
No,
districts?
the 2-day charrettes will be for each
He's
council.
talking about the survey.
The survey. What's your
Yeah.
question about the survey?
Is that gonna be around the same time frame, June, July?
Yeah, it'll be ready.
The
by-
survey will be done, and, available during the charrettes.
Right.
Okay.
When do you think you'll have these dates available?
Soon. We're working through the scheduling stuff.
And it's a 2 days, so is the idea that folks would come for both of the 2 days, or it's 2 days, so if someone's busy on Monday, they also have an opportunity to come on Tuesday, or is it like a continuation?
Yeah, you don't have to, you're not gonna get locked in for 2 days. Yeah.
There's gonna be a flow.
It's free
We'll have
flowing.
to run a show,
Free
but it'll
flowing,
be fun
yeah.
in
We're
the
not
next
gonna
couple
let
weeks.
people stay for 2 days.
It's an overnight.
Yeah, it's fun.
All inclusive.
Bring your sleeping bag.
Lock in at the rec center.
Yeah.
Yeah, what kind of locations will you be holding?
We're looking at our community centers.
Public
where we
locations.
typically do our public meetings.
Yeah, once we get that final, we're working with the council districts as well. That's an important element. And so,
And we'll share all those details as soon as they're available. So.
Okay. Just wanna make sure we can tell people how they can get involved. The big thing are the charrettes, the surveys, and then the second phase is the stakeholder meetings then. So
No, the
we're gonna
stakeholder
start
meetings are
that
going to
part
be part of the charrettes.
Yeah.
And we are very much very anxious to start marketing these as well. We need to give people enough
Yeah.
time to get there.
yeah.
So you have the same, we have the same comment.
We're gonna rely upon you, Garrett, to help
Yeah.
us get the word out.
It's all about you getting people there.
Well, that's what I like to hear, so.
And Garrett, you can tout the SA Speak Up page because folks can go on there and register for updates. Currently.
You can get updates by registering on there.
Mhm.
Currently, yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
The economic impact was going to be at the early June,
I
or
don't think it's gonna be ready for the early June, but by mid-June for sure.
by mid-June.
Molly?
Well,